Hiya folks, I wanted to create a video to help people on their spiritual journey. I started out learning and practicing Zen about 25 years ago, and since then adopted things in a way that makes sense to me. As time went on, I started helping others with their spiritual journey, and many have said this methodology really works for them as well. So I wanted to share it here. There are many ways of explaining the phases and steps towards awakening. This is just mine. I call it energy pathwork. It's a combination of the chakra system, the tree of life from the Kabbalah, and Jungian psychology. None of the concepts are new, but they have worked well for navigating the path to awareness and then awakening for myself and people I've worked with on their journeys. When I say chakras, I mean it in terms of energy centers. To study and know the chakras, you really have to live the chakras and study Hinduism on a daily basis. But I take some of the main concepts, apply them to the pathways of the tree of life, and use Jungian psychology underneath. I'll explain all of this in a minute, as it can get quite detailed. Now, you can spend your entire life studying Jung, the Kabbalah, or Hinduism and never be finished. Many do. When it comes to Jung, what energy pathwork specifically focuses on is Jung's work on the shadow self. So there are three phases to a personal spiritual journey. There's the egoic life, also known as your conditioned self. This is what we are all familiar with. Once you begin reaching awareness and realize that there's a difference between the person and the patterns that you are used to acting out every day and your conscience, then you come in contact with your authentic self, or in other words, your conditioned conscience. Realizing the difference between these two is what's called awareness. Reaching awareness is one very big phase. Then, once you can regularly delve into your authentic self, you begin reaching your higher conscience, or what is called the unconditioned conscience. This is where you act as an observer of your own life, and you can begin connecting to outside energies as well. This is when awakening begins to happen. There are many steps in each of these. For instance, you could go to a therapist your entire life and get a better understanding of your egoic self and never reach awareness. Many people do, and doing so usually leads to what many would consider to be a successful life. But to understand the three phases of your personal journey, you need to understand these three aspects of your being. When people reach out to me with questions, they're usually full of a bunch of different segments of the journey and trying to do too much at once. For instance, they'll want to astral travel or manifest something in their life, but they can't figure out why nothing is happening, or suddenly a whole lot of negative things are happening and they don't know why. And it all comes down to not understanding those three aspects of human existence. Sometimes people experience sudden awakenings. This is usually after a traumatic experience in their lives. It can be very confusing to the people who go through this because on top of the trauma, they now have difficulty relating to the people in their lives, but they might not know why. Sometimes people with sudden awakenings slide back into their old habits, and this is because they haven't done the shadow work to shed the ego in the first place. There is a stage in the awakening phase called the dark night of the soul, where you learn all the tricky ways your own personal ego likes to insert itself into your life. Dark night of the soul is a way of embedding or reinforcing the awareness stage. People with sudden awakenings haven't gone through this, and over time, for some, their ego makes a partial return to their life because they don't have a basis of awareness before awakening. However, you don't have to go through a personal trauma to begin your spiritual journey. It all starts with shadow work, and nobody wants to do it. To put it another way, shadow work is about understanding why you feel and do the things you do, what caused them, and the emotional tendencies and thoughts you generally play out in your daily life. These things make up your ego. Ego is different for everybody, but it culminates into a simple, often self-defeating phrase many people use, which is my life. My life is like this, or these things always happen to me because that's what my life is like. Ego can be much like karma as well, another label or narrative. They are both a lot like clothes that you subconsciously choose to dress in every day. But knowing that emotions, thoughts, and actions that appear in your life each day can change is called awareness. While the chakra system identifies the energy centers, it doesn't identify how an individual's life may be affecting their energy centers. And that's where shadow work comes in. And that is the first step towards realizing those three aspects of your being. So again, the three aspects are your conditioned self, better known as your ego, then your conditioned conscience, which is your authentic self, and finally your unconditioned conscience. This is your higher consciousness, or the being that is you, your soul or personal essence, whatever you want to call it. Once you come to the realization that these three things exist, then you realize you are a being that is having a human experience rather than a human just being. You start choosing your own adventures. Often people get into this space at a certain age or after a life-affirming trauma because they realize their own humanity is finite. But once you establish awareness and then can access your unconditioned consciousness, i.e. be the observer of your own life, that's when you can successfully get into things like manifestation, astral travel, which have to do with setting energetic intentions. Those are the larger phases of the spiritual journey. However, long before you get to the beginning of awakening, you need to reach awareness. To do this, you need to realize that you have an ego and understand what your egoic life is like. Once this happens, that's when the shadow work begins. You have to strip your ego back layer by layer, begin to understand why each emotion has occurred, what emotions and what reactions in your daily life are unconscious and controlled by your ego rather than the reactions and emotions that you're having that you are consciously aware of and you're intentionally doing. That is the whole purpose of this, is to live a life of intention. Then, after a while, once you have observed your strongest emotions, especially the ones that have not been benefiting you, pick a time when you're not feeling that emotion and begin to explore when you first began to feel it. For many, it is from a circumstance or event from long ago. It may not be obvious at first. It will probably take some time. But you need to do this in order to separate negative or detrimental emotion or reaction you experience in your daily life, because once you do, you'll be much more present and less burdened with thoughts or emotions that aren't relevant or even true to the current circumstance that you're in. The timeline for this can be anywhere from weeks to years. It really depends, to be honest, on how truthful you are with yourself. We are all our own gatekeepers. Going back to the chart, what I've found is that as people do their shadow work, they might have a blockage that presents in a different way from someone else. If you look at a traditional illustration of the chakra system, they're usually shown in a vertical line centered in the body. But in my experience, this is not how issues present themselves to people. The first two chakras are the root and the sacral, or sacral, however you want to pronounce it. The root, as you can imagine, is the foundation of everything in your life. This has to do with things like security in your home, your general outlook on the world, and likewise how you think the world views you, as well as basic levels of trust. People who come from difficult family backgrounds often have blockages here in the root chakra. Then the sacral chakra is all about emotion. How do you feel about yourself or your environment? This is where we get into self-esteem, your degree of honesty, assertiveness, and aggression. And then comes the solar plexus. The solar plexus, in my mind, is different because for the first time, it is the first energy center where you can differ between how you act towards yourself and how you act towards the rest of the world. It's where we start venturing out, where our energy starts venturing out to other people. Then we see the same possibilities with the throat and the third eye. Many times we can interpret or see things differently emotionally inside ourselves compared to what's actually going on outside of ourselves. Each energy center should be centered, but more often than not they are off-center based on someone's strong belief or reactions to the outside world or strong beliefs or reactions to themselves. And often there is a combination. For me, maintaining awareness makes me think of the great Lao Tzu, who said, "Watch your thoughts, for they become your words. Watch your words, for they become your actions. Watch your actions, because they become your habits. Watch your habits because they become your character. And watch your character because it becomes your destiny. Doing the shadow work for each chakra can help bring these back into alignment, along with meditation and maintaining awareness of oneself thereafter. These are the basics of energy pathwork. My next videos, I will cover shadow work through the chakras. I won't be able to cover every personal circumstance in each of the chakras, but I'll delve deeper into each of them. In the meantime, if you're struggling, you can always contact me on Reddit at Taoist360 or through my website, energypathworking.com, which has a few more resources. Until next time.